Carlos wrote in with a question about which country's law will apply to his film. I'm Gordon Firemark, and this is Asked and Answered, where I answer your entertainment law questions from industry professionals like you, so you can take your career and business to the next level. Carlos says that he's almost finished raising funding for a low-budget romantic comedy that includes some parodies of some famous American films. But he's from Mexico, and he knows that Mexican law is different, and he wants to know if it's better to register the script and the film in the U.S. in order to be protected under U.S. laws. He also adds that he will obviously carefully respect the rules for parody here in the U.S. He knows it's okay to make parodies under certain circumstances, but he needs to be sure of how to stay out of trouble with the project. Well, that's a great question, Carlos. Now, first off, I'm a U.S. attorney, licensed in California. I don't know much about Mexican law on this or any other subject, so I'm not going to pretend that I do. I'm going to share some basic legal information, and these videos should never be construed as giving legal advice. For that, you'd need to hire a lawyer to advise you after a full review of the facts, the laws, and other circumstances for your particular situation. Okay, so is it better to register in the U.S. or Mexico? Well, both the U.S. and Mexico are signatory to the Berne Convention, the International Copyright Treaty, so they've agreed to mutually respect each other's laws. Now, the nature, scope, and length of copyright protection is fairly consistent from country to country under this treaty, so I don't really think this matters all that much. But if you're planning on distributing the film in the U.S., it probably does make sense to register it here. Whether or not you register in your home country first, that's a good idea. That way, you have a strong chain of title to show your distributors, and you'll be entitled to things like statutory damages and an award of attorney's fees if you ever do have to sue someone here in the U.S. for infringement. Now, you're correct, though, about the applicability of the protections for parody being a function of U.S. law primarily. I don't know how Mexico treats parody. In the U.S., we have our First Amendment protections for free speech and press, and so we're free to make fun of other artists' work in order to promote public discussion about things. So, if your work is actually a parody of the thing you're copying, you're probably going to be well protected in the U.S. But if the material is being distributed elsewhere, you might be subject to the laws of each country where it's available, even though you're in Mexico and the film might be registered here in the U.S. So, it's wise to evaluate this on a country-by-country basis, especially if there's any likelihood that you're going to travel to one of those countries that maybe doesn't recognize parody as a protected form of speech, especially if those countries are not signatories of the Berne Convention, that treaty I mentioned earlier. Thanks for watching. If you like these videos, please click the button to subscribe, and if you have a question you'd like me to answer here, head on over to firemark.com/questions.